Hello and welcome to She the People TV Women's Writers Fest powered by Colors. I'm Yamini and I hope that you are having a great time tuning into all the conversations that we have so lovingly curated for you today. Taking up the conversation forward, the next panel is called Rewriting Identity. On our panel today are two writers who have reconstructed the characterization of women and men through their books in their own special way. We have one author who writes books with a female protagonist in the genre of crime fiction, which is often, accused of stereotyping women as either victims or vixens. And the second guest on our panel is a writer who has written a book that has male protagonists in it, and it revolves around their lives and their problems and their identity crisis, but from a female perspective. Today we have with us Anubha Yadav, who is the author of Scripting Bollywood, The Candid Conversations with Women Screenwriters of Hindi Cinema. Her latest book, The Anger of Saintly Men, that came out in February this year. Uh, Yadav is the winner of Dastan Award in 2014 and was also shortlisted for Vasafiri New Writing Prize. The second guest today is Madhumita Bhattacharya, a journalist turned freelance writer who's the author of crime fiction books like The Masala Murder, Dead in a Mumbai Minute, Goa Undercover, and her latest offering, Dirty Women. Welcome, both of you. To start the conversation, I would like to ask you, Anubha. Many male writers are often accused of writing female characters that reinforce existing social stereotypes about women or creating new ones, such as the manic pixie girl, the sanskari girl next door who will win her man over the glammed up college doll, that erratic woman who just has too many mood swings, and the list is endless. So when you write a book about men, did you have any such stereotypes in your mind that you wanted to stay clear of consciously?
I doubt that any writer. I think every writer is careful that they don't end up bracketing themselves and putting themselves in a box. And I was also, yeah. And largely, I think it's important not to be essentialist. And because as soon as you start seeing them as boxed men only, yeah, you already have started with a problem. So I did struggle, and my struggle largely was that I'm a feminist, and I'm writing about this a story which has predominantly is a story governed by three male protagonists. There are women in the book, yeah, and like all families are made of men and women, yeah. So, but yes, it was a story that is divided into three parts with three young boys who grow into men. So the struggle largely was that how do you represent them as wholesome people? So if you, and I think what was important for me was to ask myself that being in the body, a female body, yeah, um, how do you find a way to move beyond your experience, yeah, and have empathy to create these people. So beyond a point, I think a writer has to also create characters who are experiential people, who are not only a body, who are not only a gender they are performing in the society, in a culture, yeah, and thereby thus just a construct. So the challenge and the difficulty was in being able to do that. And as soon as I think you start seeing them as people, yeah, and with experiences with which are textured, which are defined by class, which are defined by their own situations, their unique experiences, then I think you immediately start moving away from a very reductive discourse which can box you into stereotypes. Yeah, that's where stereotypes, reductive stereotypes, come from. And I think this moves beyond just how to write. I think it's also about how you read, how publishing sees women writers. Yeah. So, for example, a universal writer is a male writer. Yeah. But as soon as you start, there is something which is not universal, then you're a woman writer. Why? Yeah, and I think this is changing. Yeah, it is changing. Arundhati Roy is not a woman writer alone. She's a writer. Anuradha Roy is a writer. Jumpar Lahiri is a writer. So I think this idea of creating binaries is also part of a historical discourse which has come to us, and we are part of changing that discourse. And I think it is changing, how women writers are perceived and how all of this discourse happens in binaries largely.
Absolutely. Do you agree, Madhumita? What do you have to say on this? Are we moving away from this traditional, stereotypical characterization?
I definitely agree with what Anubha had to say. From the point that she made earlier about what is the origin of that stereotype. And as a writer, if you are trying to create a picture of an authentic life, then you are not thinking in terms of stereotypes. So that is the first thing. No writer wants to write a stereotypical character. If they're doing so, it's bad writing. However, there's also a space for archetypal characters in literature, and they're, especially in genre fiction, where I have spent most of my career, there is an idea that we have tropes that readers want to read. They want to see the same thing a little differently. So how can you also turn those expectations of genre, of the kind of book that you are writing, on their head? So I think when we're talking about stereotypes in fiction and in society, it is very much in the hands of the person who's doing the creating, as well as the person who's receiving it. A lot of people will see the same character through a different lens based purely on their experience. And to some extent, that's outside a writer's control. As soon as it's in the world, it no longer belongs to us. And that is not something that we can get away from. And a lot of stereotypes do come from some place that is real. Now, how do you separate that from what is artificial, what is outdated, what is not true to your character on the page? And that's the job of a writer.
That's a very good point that you've made, that no writer wants to box themselves up. But why does this happen? Do you feel that writers often give into the pressure created by best-selling lists and what people are reading and what publishers want to publish? And they're like, just let it be. I'll give into this pressure and I'll write what people want to read and not what I want to present. Madhumita, what do you have to say?
I think there are two kinds of writers. The kind of writer who is more comfortable thinking in commercial terms, and the kind of writer who is not. And these two people are quite different in their objectives as a writer. Neither is right, neither is wrong. They're just a different approach to the art. I have always had a very workmanlike attitude towards writing. My objectives in life have always been to write, and in doing so, one must also live. And so I'm quite comfortable to play within a genre fiction landscape. However, my books have never really been stereotypically commercial in the Indian milieu either. And definitely in Dirty Women, I have stepped outside of that space. It makes it very difficult, honestly. It took a long time to place the book, and you have to be very comfortable with rejection if you want to color outside the lines in publishing. It's just the way it is. And there is no... There is obviously the exception. Literary fiction is full of exceptions such as this. But that isn't my style either. That's not the way I write. So I had to find something in between these spaces that felt true to the kinds of things that I wanted to write, true to the issues I wanted to write about. And my books, especially the latest one, is very issue-driven. within the framework of a crime fiction novel. And it's quite liberating, actually, to have that sort of structure as well to play with. As an ardent reader of the genre, I'm a fan. I don't see that there's anything wrong with that either. I'm definitely not the kind of writer who looks down on any kind of writing. Every kind of writing has a reader, and it's all good. You just have to find your reader as a writer and your writer as a reader, and that's perfection when that happens.
That's true. Anubha, what are your thoughts? Should writers give into the pressure of what public wants to read and what publishers want to publish, or should they not?
Actually, I totally agree with Madhumita. There is writing, and then there is the industry. So, and I think they are intermingling, but then there are also definite. I mean, it's also an art, and it's also a craft, and it's also an industry. Yeah. So I think, and there is every kind of reader in the industry. So I do think that anybody who wishes to write and use a certain stereotypes has immediately got an antidote of someone who's not doing it and not creating that character. And if a person, we live in a free country, last I knew. I mean, you can just drop that book and pick up the book which works for you, which doesn't have those stereotypes. Yeah, I mean, the question is, do we have enough books which are doing that? That's a debatable question. Yeah, I mean, there is the industry constantly producing a kind of stereotypes of a kind of people? That's a debatable question and a more important question. Yeah, are certain marginalized groups not represented enough? That's a debatable question, important question. Yeah, and if a marginalized group is consistently represented as a stereotype, what is the impact? How is it that a privileged group is not represented in a reductive way? Yeah, there is something happening there, and that politics also needs to be. I mean, it's an important thing to talk, because it doesn't happen automatically. There are certain mechanisms of the industry, yeah, which are making it happen in a certain way. Yeah, so all that needs to be discussed, debated, but at the same time, as we discuss, debate it, yeah, and contest it, yeah, we should also allow all kind of writing to be, because every kind of writing has a reader. Until it has a reader, I mean, even if it doesn't have a reader, yeah, it has the right to be. But at the same time, I think discussion and discourse on who is being stereotyped, who is being represented in a certain way, yeah, where are the complex identities coming, who's writing, is only a section of privileged people writing about a section of privileged people. Yeah, I think those issues also need discussion, urgent discussion.
Absolutely. One of the biggest stereotypes that women have to face is, sexualization. Sexualization of their bodies, their sexual urges. So, as women writers, when you write about love and passion and sexuality and sex, what kind of gaze do you bring to your books? Aruba, you can start.
Okay. Uh, so I it's interesting. Writing sex actually, is tricky, and it takes time and energy to get writing sex right. Yeah, because there is a emotional atmosphere that is there in that space. There is language, yeah, and you have to get the language right. Yeah, and of course you have to get the you have to get a lot of things right when you're writing sex. And I think it's important to write it in a way that you as a writer find acceptable. Yeah, beyond a point. And I think it's really not important to think how will it be perceived or how will it be read. I think what is important is how does it work within your larger narrative? Yeah, is it forced? is your character working out of character? Yeah. And do your is your character having sex like the character would largely behave? Yeah. So I think those things are important. And are they having fun? Yeah, so it's important to have fun. So because if you're writing sex with like a controlled experience and scared of censors and scared of keeping certain taboos, then I guess yeah, it could be problematic. It could be very freeing to write sex in a certain way.
Madhumita, your thoughts?
So there's two aspects of it. One is I'll start from where Anubha left off of writing sex, incorporating meaningful experience or not meaningful experience, whatever the case may be, as long as it's true to the characters, true to the book you're writing. That is one part of it. And again, I do understand that it is a struggle to write sex in a way that is not repetitive, honestly. The most difficult part of writing a good sex scene is that it's been written to death. And to have to do that through fresh eyes means really inhabiting your character. So if you read, any number of romance novels, of genre romance, like traditional, now you see, like, if you break it down, how much of the action is what's happening to the body and how much of the action is what is happening inside the head. And that is where you realize that even in a very, cubbyhold kind of sex that is written about quite commonly in books, even there, it's not about physical only. It is very much what the experience between these two characters is. Sex is often a way to deepen the relationship, and it can and does, and in my view, should feature in a book about humans, basically, who are in a relationship. Now, when it comes to the sexualization of females in books, yes, it's true. In my books, males are also sexualized. We do have that is also a part of our literary tradition. The male stereotype, who is either tall, dark, and handsome, or your, shy, withdrawn Darcy character. These are, tropes you see over and over and over again, and they appeal and work for a reason. People want to, female readers, male readers have that desire to look at, the male through that sexualized gaze as well. So as a writer, I think my books are not as sexy as they could be, but they're probably more sexy than I would ever have felt comfortable writing when I started out. And it has been a journey to make a more rich sexual life. And in fact, Dirty Women is very much about the sexuality of two women in their own spheres and how it plays out so differently in our lives. And that's another aspect of sexuality that, two women growing up with the same experiences can learn to express themselves so differently when it comes to sex. And there's so much repression and there's so much judgment around it. And what does it take to break free of that judgment in our own lives? And that's pretty much one of the core themes of the book. So yes, we definitely should ask this question more and more. And what are the kinds of, sex in books has really evolved to a point where, there is something for every kind of reader again. And I think we should embrace it.
Also, Yamini, if I may add to what I was saying and what Madhumita just said, when I was writing Anger of Saintly Men, I also, as a writer, as a woman writer, I also was very aware when I was writing these scenes, that I was very comfortable writing with my gaze about the agency the man had. So I was like, no, but why am I giving the agency in this scene to the man? Yeah, because I mean, the agency can be taken in different ways by both of them. Yeah, which is how it should play out. But there is also a lot of what we have seen and what we have grown up, yeah, which is also there in us, and we have to constantly revise it, question it, interrogate it as writers and as women. Yeah. So if you'll read Anger of Saintly Men, you will see that there is no objectification, but there is an awareness as to the man's body also. Yeah. And the gaze is, I mean, you can say that the gaze is upturned or turned, but I think that's only fair. Yeah, that's only fair. And the agency is of having sex, yeah, and taking agency in bed is with the man and the woman. Yeah. And sometimes with the woman more, and sometimes with the man more, depending on what kind of personalities they are, and what kind of characters they are, and what is the larger discourse and narrative. Yeah. So I think that's that awareness when you're writing it is also critical, especially when you're writing bodies, yeah, and how to write about bodies and who to give agency to.
Absolutely, absolutely, 100%, Anubha. So, coming to you, Madhumita, you started writing crime novels with a woman protagonist when the genre itself hadn't picked up in India. You know, were you apprehensive how your center character would be received by the readers? What was playing in your head at that time?
So I think I knew that the reader was there. There wasn't a question in my mind. There wasn't adequate representation in the Indian writing in English, at least. And, I've grown up on a very rich tradition of detective fiction, starting from Feluda and Agatha Christie and while Feluda is brilliant, it's a very male space, but on the other hand, you have Agatha Christie, who's, of course there's Miss Marple, but there's also Poirot, who is in his own way, we talk about characters breaking stereotypes. I mean, he was the ultimate foppish gentleman who was pomading well before it became fashionable today. So it was the idea that there was this space for and a need for this character was very, very much, at the top of my mind. I didn't think that the readers would have a problem with her femininity. And she's not, in any way, she's not, a lot of female detectives, even in the West, get portrayed as hard-boiled, hard-drinking, hard-smoking, and this girl is very level-headed. She's very, on an even keel throughout, sort of unnaturally so for someone so young. That's what makes her special. That's sort of her defining characteristic, is just how not a mess she is while the world around her is turning to, puddles of, from her parents and, everyone. And that's how she sort of becomes a detective, to seek order in chaos. And I found that quite, charming to write. Like I liked her. I'm definitely not like her, but I definitely had this idea of this woman who was capable beyond her age and station and her access. Access in detective fiction is a very big thing. Is your detective an insider, or is your detective an outsider? And there's a very big divide between these. And so she straddles this line through the 3 books in the series. And, no one has ever told me that, why did you write a female detective? But at all the interviews I get asked, why did you write a female detective? So I think there is yes, it was definitely before, like I don't know whether that book could be written now or published now, or whether there is a market for it. Genuinely, these are questions I don't have answers to. The publishing space for crime fiction in India is very narrow. There isn't a lot of demand for homegrown crime fiction, and I think it's an absolute tragedy. But that is what it is. And maybe if I was writing a male character, there would be a bigger market for it. It would be more thrillery and would be, but I can't. I don't want to. That is, a line I'm not willing to cross right now. So that's not to say I wouldn't, but yeah, so there's absolutely there was no doubt then, and there's still no doubt in my mind now that that was the right choice.
Yeah, Madhumita, but that's really heartbreaking, actually. To know that even today there is no demand for a female detective in Indian fiction.
Not just female detective, crime fiction in general. It's really quite tragic. There is no demand for Indian homegrown crime fiction, though there's a very, very big readership for all of the international names. So it's really a question of, okay, one is it a marketing issue? Is it there a divide between the publishers and how maybe we're not reaching the right readers? On the other hand, maybe it's just, we've all grown up with these international stalwarts, and that's, if we're reading crime, that's what we want to read. And if we want to read something else, then we turn to the Indian authors. I really don't know. Honestly, this Dirty Women might be my last crime book for the Indian market. It was just very difficult.
That's tragic. Please don't stop writing crime fiction. Please
you
write
also write crime fiction, right, Yamini?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I find it tragic.
There's a revival coming.
Yeah, but sorry, Yamini, I know you have your next question. I'll just end in 5 minutes. Because, in all these women detectives in web series are doing so well. But again, they're Scandinavian, European, American. But I'm just hoping.
There was interest from, fairly large studio, and then nothing came of it, unfortunately. I really thought that might transform the fortunes of poor Rima Ray, who has, but, you never know what happens next. So, and the industry is changing a lot all the time. So I'm hoping that soon, people will have the appetite for some kick-ass Indian detectives.
Yeah, kudos to that.
Fingers crossed. So coming to you, Anubha, your book talks about how we raise our boys, patriarchy's grip over their lives, and this is something that's not discussed enough in India, be it on books, on television, or in our drawing rooms. Why do so many men fail to see the negative impacts of patriarchy in their own lives, according to you?
Yamini, this is a twofold answer. When you are in a privileged position, it is very seldom that you see that privileged position is also harming you. Yeah. And it's also that, the harm is very subliminal. Yeah. And even if the harm is there, sometimes you are ready to let go of that harm because the privilege is giving you so many, it's giving you power. So if you just look at the power structure in a family, which is a very important unit in terms of when we are talking about male privilege, we start acculturation and teaching men to be a certain kind of men in families. And this book is placed thus in a family, the power structure of a family. So in that context, I think it's how we acculture men, and we teach them a certain power equation and give them certain privileges, and we keep giving those privileges to those men till there is no scope for interrogation within them as to what are the harmful effects of these privileges that are coming to me. Now, what we also teach them is a lot of shame. So if you are questioning and interrogating, there is shame, there is guilt. You are less of a man. You are not. You are not playing the role you should play. You are failing your family. You're failing your manhood. You're failing the people around you, especially the women. So it's so gridlocked. It's actually very perfectly designed to not be. You can't come out of it. Yeah, it's so gridlocked, and it is a perfect gridlock system which will only give you privileges till you keep working in a certain way. So it's actually very difficult for men to interrogate it because of those power structures that make it almost impossible to question the system. Yeah, and there is a price if you question it. And it has to be paid. Like, women have taken so many centuries in interrogating and questioning, and we all have paid a price. We are still paying that price. Yeah. So I think a lot of feminist men have started doing that in the last 50 years. Yeah, and they are continuing to do that in families. It's just that I think we need to make it more, we need to normalize it, and we need to find more people, men, who are ready to stand with us in dismantling this whole system, which actually harms them and shames them as much as it harms and shames women. Yeah. So, but the recognition is not there. The recognition came more easily in women because, well, we had no privileges. We were so and are so marginalized. But for men, it is more complex. Yeah, because they enjoy those privileges also. Yeah, they enjoy that power also. So it becomes different. And
Absolutely. Madhumita, how did your background as a journalist shape your writing? Do your fictional works carry fragments of real stories that you may have worked on, reported on, or came across while you were working with the paper?
Um, yeah, so obviously, writing as a journalist for, I was in a newsroom for about a decade. This latest book, Dirty Women, is actually very much a product of that. I wouldn't say my earlier works were as much, but this it's sort of a dual narrative, and one of the key characters is a journalist, and she is investigating. Not really investigating, but she's in the midst of this disappearance of a child. And it, she drives, sorry. I think I need to pause. Is that okay?
Sure, sure. You can break it. No problem. Anubha, let's move on to you then while we have Madhumita back. So, Anubha, when it comes to making a commentary on social and political issues, usually it is said that the onus falls on non-fiction works. But do you feel that fictional authors often sneak in political and social commentary into their books and thus do a better job of raising a voice, making a statement, and just putting things out there in a more covert way, but with a larger impact?
I mean, I don't think it's about better representation. I don't think it's I mean, there is no need to compare. There are different genres with different purposes for different readers and for different pleasures and different joys. Yeah, with different techniques and methods, craft and art. But at the same time, I mean, to say that, I mean, everything is political, outside writing, inside writing. So of course, almost, I mean, every fiction writer is working within a certain politics. Their politics could be misfounded, but there is politics. Yeah. So of course, and I mean, I truly believe that sometimes you really need fiction to be able to say what you otherwise perhaps can't say as effectively, or I mean, it kind of enables the
Okay, I think we've lost Anubha. Madhumita, can you hear me? Just unmute yourself.
Yes.
So let's get
Went
back to the
wrong.
question that you were answering
Yes.
while Madhumita.
Sorry. I really broke the flow. Um, okay. Should I continue from where I left off? Would you like
Yeah,
me to start?
definitely.
Okay.
No, just continue.
Yeah. So this the idea that journalists often find themselves in very sticky situations, and at the same time, everyone has very strange expectations of journalists. On one hand, they're expected to know everything, and on the other hand, they are believed by friends, family, larger population to know nothing. And especially, there has been a very steep decline uh, in the prestige of being a journalist in our country. It is almost a dirty word, actually. And this thought was very much there in the book. And so the idea that as a journalist, you do have access, but you also are in a situation where you are helpless. And that is something that I have personally experienced in, very brutal ways. When you write about people who are vulnerable, people who are, marginalized, you often come up against, terrible situations, and you are not in any position to help. And I think some of that helplessness that I felt came out in the story of, which is the opposite, where she does exercise her agency in a way that really would not happen, but that's the wonder of fiction. It allows you to have a little flight of fantasy. But it's a very real story. It's very gritty. So it's not, it's definitely not, glamorizing that relationship of journalist and subject. It's a complicated relationship.
So just stay with me since we are running out of time. What Anubha and I were discussing before there was a network issue with you was how fictional authors often tend to sneak in political and social commentary into their works, while we usually think that the onus of doing so lies with the non-fiction authors. So do you think that fiction authors do a better job at it of putting forth issues and commentary, but in a more subtle way?
I don't know if it's a better job, but it's an equally important job. As someone who reads both fiction and nonfiction quite widely, it is a different experience. You are allowing your reader to take this journey, which is essentially an empathetic experience. So hopefully, even a non-political, like even something which doesn't intend to be political, if it's telling a story and if it's telling it sensitively, then it can achieve that position. I think one of the most political films I've ever watched was a movie by the name of Monster. It came out maybe 10 years ago, and Charlize Theron was playing the role of a serial killer. And not once did they mention the word capital punishment in that entire film. But Eileen Wuornos was executed, if I'm not mistaken. But it is such a potent argument against capital punishment at the same time. And it left me, absolutely, just shaken, like at the end of the day, to put someone in the shoes of another is a powerful experience. And yes, absolutely, it's a political act.
Madhumita, sorry. Thank you, Madhumita. Anubha, your final thoughts on this?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with Madhumita, and like I said before, I mean, fiction sometimes it becomes a vehicle to raise issues which might become, which perhaps can't be raised as efficiently and effectively through nonfiction. Yeah. So, and thus, if you see the history of fiction in every decade, in every world, there have been books that have been banned. Yeah. If they were so apolitical, I mean, not that censorship is the only way to measure the politics of a work, But then, of course, I mean, we know that there is a constant it is a constant effective way to tell stories of deeply political lives, and we all lead deeply political lives, be it the trees around us, be it the animals, yeah, be it the objects, be it the people, yeah. So inanimate and animate things, we are living deeply political lives, and I think fiction, in many ways, brings out those complexities in a very different way than nonfiction.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madhumita and Anubha. This was a great conversation. It was lovely having you both on Women's Writers Fest.
Thank you, Yamini. Thank you so much for having me, and it was really wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you. I too enjoyed myself. It was delightful. Thank you.